You're driving down the road and your wife says, "Where do you want to eat at?" And you think, "Oh gosh, here we go again." Don't worry about it. Pull out your phone and get on that Fat Boy app. The Fat Boy app's your mom and pop restaurant locator. That's right. It's one of a kind. There's not another app out there that does what this app does. Yeah, you can search restaurants near me, but you're not going to find those hidden gems and mom and pops, those special places to get that good old open faced roast of beef. I like me some roast beef. So download the Fat Boy app on iOS or Android. Either one of them, you can do it. Take it with you. Check them out on Facebook. Go to their website and become a Fat Boy or Dining Diva, because when a Fat Boy tells you it's good, it's good. Need an oil change? Need your tires rotated or a new set of tires? You need an alignment? Holler at Jake Wolf at Wolf's Customs. Hey, when you go in to buy some tires, if you mention FPA, Front Porch America, and Wolf's Customs, and tell them that you've seen it here, you're going to get 10% off your purchase and free rotations of the lifetime of those tires. So that's Wolf's Customs there in Waverly, Kentucky. Your car not pulling like it should. It's going to have a little bit of Jimmy shaking going on. You need a transmission work. You need that tranny worked on. Holler at Stephen Watson at Watson's Transmissions, man. I think he's the only one that I know around here that works on them. The man can tear it down and put it back together blindfolded with one hand, I believe. The best in Union County. So holler at Stephen Watson for all your transmission needs. Ironstein Coffee, located in Morganfield, Kentucky. Hey, man, they are out there brewing up some coffee, man. They are tearing it up. They're getting all over the place, and they got some good coffee. You can find them in Morganfield, Kentucky at their shop, and you can even go into Jen's General Store, step back in time, get you some of them old-timey candies and old-timey sodas, get you a cup of that Ironstein Coffee. Now, Ironstein Coffee also will cater to your business. What I mean by that is you got a business, you want your name on some coffee to give out as gifts or just to show off a little bit, holler at Ironstein Coffee there in Morganfield, Kentucky. You can find them on Facebook and the web at iron-stein.com. Man, they got some good coffee. That's all I can say. And I like to thank my sponsors. Those were my sponsors, and I like to thank them a lot for stepping up and helping me out on this podcast. So let's get to the story. Welcome back to Front Porch America. And today's episode's a deeply personal episode. It's a conversation I never imagined having, a tribute to a friend I miss dearly, Kevin Maxfield. Kevin, as many of you know, was a force of nature, a vibrant soul, a brilliant mind, and a dear friend to many. He also faced pancreatic cancer with an incredible courage and grace. This isn't about illness. It's a story about life, about Kevin's life, the impact he had, the lessons he taught, and the memories we will always cherish. We'll dive into his resilience, faith, and most importantly, we will remember the man who touched so many lives. This episode is for anyone who is loved and lost, for anyone seeking inspiration in the face of adversity, and for everyone who knew and loved Kevin Maxfield. So please join me as we celebrate his life. I sat down with his wife, Kayla Davis Maxfield, and man, she's got a story to tell, and she can tell it. Kevin was a wonderful man. Many people's lives were changed by this man, and it was my honor to sit down with his wife, Kayla, for her to tell and talk about their journey. So grab you a box of Kleenexes because you're going to need them. I'm telling you. Hey, there's some laughs in here as well. So thanks for watching, and let's get to it. Kayla, it's good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
I've waited a little while to ask you to come on, but before we get started, I do have some gifts for you and Annie.
Stop it.
So this is the Fat Boy app is my biggest sponsor, one of my biggest sponsors.
I love them. They're everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
They're phenomenal.
And they're growing.
That's amazing.
And their app is one of a kind. There's no other apps. You can use your search engines on your phone to find restaurants, but you can't find just mom and pop restaurants.
Yeah.
And that's all they do.
Well,
feel free to open it up, go through it. So we got you. You know, they usually load us down, and you're a pretty special guest. So we wanted to make sure that we got Annie something as well.
They are incredible. When my parents, we had a restaurant. It was called Animes on Main, mom and pop type deal.
Yeah.
And I wish that they would have been around when that was going on because really they are phenomenal. Well, cool. Thank you all so much.
And there's some coffee in there from Ironstein Coffee. Yeah, that's a cold brew. I figured out of everybody, you would know how to do all that because there's a process on that cold brew coffee that I was like, I don't even know.
That's it right there. Shop locally.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool shirt too.
I love it.
So we got Annie a shirt. We got Annie a cup. I got Annie a shirt from Lids for Kids, which is a buddy of mine. He's a firefighter in Panama City. He started a non-for-profit organization that kind of helps kids. Makes them an honorary firefighter for the day, and they get an autographed helmet. And so we got a shirt and some bracelets in there, and a hat. No, I know my hat. Your hat's on the table.
Pop socket.
Yeah, there's all kinds of goodies in there. So,
Annie's gonna flip.
Good.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. It may be a little big on her.
She'll grow into it. She'll grow into it. She's like me.
Yeah.
Oh, well, cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's just my way of saying thanks, and it kind of helps show my appreciation by giving the gifts out to you guys. And like I said, the Fat Boy app, I couldn't hardly do a lot of this without them.
They're cool. They're cool people.
Yeah. So I appreciate you coming. It was funny that when we talked, we've rescheduled twice? I think once or twice.
Yep.
And that happens quite a bit actually. So I think what we're going to talk about, what I want to talk about today, or I want you to tell, is your journey. I want you to tell me how you met Kevin, what made you actually, or how did you know that he was the one, right? And then we'll just let you just kind of unravel that whole thing, and then just whatever you feel comfortable saying, you can say.
Okay.
Anytime you need to stop, take a break, we'll stop and take a break. So.
All right. Well, I was actually talking about Animes on Main, the restaurant that my parents had, and I was 20 years old, fresh dropout out of college. Okay, went to Murray State for a semester and was just like, man, I want to go back home to Marion, and so came back home to Marion. My parents opened up Animes on Main, named after my grandmother, and so I was waiting tables there. And prior to that, we had bought it from a gentleman named Glenn Conger, and he had Glenn's on Main there. Well, during the time of Glenn's on Main, Kevin, my husband, late husband, he was working as the chaplain of the detention center in town, and he was doing like the Dave Ramsey plan. Okay, he wanted to pay off everything.
So how in depth did he get on that Dave Ramsey?
Well, he paid everything off besides the house.
Is it a legit? I mean, does it actually work? Or is it?
It works if you work it. Yeah. I mean, if you do it correctly. And
I've seen it, and like it's pretty popular now.
Yeah.
And I remember early on when he came out. Like a lot of people thought, oh, this is a hoax or whatever, and I've always wondered about it. Yeah. I've always wondered if it was legit, and Kevin would be the one to make it work.
It was legit. So. It was legit. So he gets a job washing dishes, right? He's not 40 yet, 38 years old. He's like, I want to pay off everything. So he gets a job washing dishes for Glenn. And when we bought the restaurant from Glenn, he kind of got grandfathered.
He came with it.
Okay, but I remember before we bought it, I remember the day that he came in the restaurant, and I was there with Beth Hodge. I don't know if you remember her. Beth Sennett now. She was the head waitress, and I was underneath her, and she said, I know that you're going to have the hots for this guy, okay? And I had never heard of Kevin. I'd never heard the name Kevin Maxfield in my life. Didn't know who he was, never seen him. Didn't know anything about him, but Beth knew that I had a thing for older guys, right? And this would be a good time to say that Kevin was 19 years my senior, okay? But she said, you're going to have the hots for this guy, and I'm like, Beth, I'm going to try to date somebody my own age, man. Like, I'm not, Kevin comes in the back door, and he's wearing this black Pandemonium disc shirt, okay, disc golf shirt. He's got on these black and yellow, like electric yellow shorts and electric yellow shoes, Under Armour. I can still see him in my mind, and he's got a Cubs hat on, okay? And we're Cardinals fans, right?
Right.
And I look him in the face, and he's doing that walk. You know how he walked.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm going to marry him. And that's literally, you can ask my mother, that's the words that came out of my mouth. I'm going to marry him. He was so handsome, and he had these dimples, you know, those dimples. He smiled real big, and Beth is just giving it to him, and he's going right back at her, just being a smart aleck. Yeah. And I just was like, this is it. This is it. He was a missionary. The church that he was going to at the time, Life in Christ, I was going there too. And they had just recently went on a trip to Haiti. And he was just really engulfed in the missionary lifestyle, spreading Jesus Christ all over the world. He had been to Thailand. He had been all over. Yeah. And so I just saw him, and I thought, this is it. He's the one. And so we had Animes on Maine. He got grandfathered in. I started working in the kitchen to be a little bit closer to him, right? You know. Yeah. And the next thing you know, I finally talked him into taking me out on a date. I talked him into it.
Really?
Yeah, had to. I came on a little strong, obviously.
So, what was Maxfield's reaction like to this whole thing?
He was just like, "You're 20 years old, and I'm 38. What are you doing?" Yeah. You know, and in my mind, I'm thinking I'm finding the love of my life. I mean, obviously, what are you doing? But Kevin, you know, he was very recluse is the word that I know how to use, because he was just, you know, he had this solace face all the time. Yeah. He was just very quiet, he didn't speak unless it was important. And me, I mean, I'm just yapping all the time, you know, so he was really taken back by how overbearing I was, you know what I mean? And yeah, that's just kind of how it all started out. But it all kind of shifted whenever Kevin, he finally took me out on a date, and I would just show up. He loved to tell people I would just show up at his house with Dairy Queen and be like, "Get out here! I've got a chicken strip basket," you know.
So you're basically initiating secret dates that he didn't realize.
He didn't know. Yeah. He'd be like, "What's up?" And I'd be like, "I'm on your back porch," you know. Just crazy, honestly.
Did you think he ever maybe talked to some of the COs at the jail, be like, "Hey, listen, how do I handle this crazy?"
I guarantee you, if you called Robbie Kirk right now, he'd be like, "Oh, he did not know what to do," because
you were this close from a restraining order.
100% almost had an IPO put on me. Yeah, right. That's crazy. But and Kevin ended up telling this story in the hospital a couple weeks before we came home on hospice. But I never really knew what it was that made him shift. Yeah. And, you know, I've always told everybody that I was overbearing and I was everything. But Kevin's birthday was October 11th, and we'll talk about, you know, his birthday stuff in a little while. But I went to Dairy Queen. He was working up at the restaurant, and I went to Dairy Queen, and they had the little cakes in the cups. You know what I mean? Whatever, yes. Yeah. And I went and grabbed him one, and it had orange icing on the top of it, and I went and grabbed him a card, and I wrote in there, "Happy birthday, Kev, you know, we appreciate you." And I took it and put it in the freezer in the back, and I texted him and told him to check in the freezer because he was up front taking food out. And he ended up telling one of his best friends, Joe, at the hospital, that was when he knew, you know, there was something special about me. And I was like, "Well, dude, I was going wild for like 4 months before." But I thought that was sweet, you know, because he was special. I knew that there was something special about him.
He was never one to, that I can remember, to, jump in, right? Yeah. I mean, he was very methodical about things, everything he done.
Kevin had to think.
The funniest thing is when because Dad was talking about, Kevin's into disc golf, and I thought, wonder how long Kevin sat and thought about his strategies, you know, because I love watching Kev play basketball. Mm-hmm. Kevin and Brandon Stennett, Allie Turley, those three guys, when just something about the way they played the game was just so cool. Yeah. And I'll never forget how Allie would shoot his free throws. He would go all the way down and then come up. But the way those three played ball, we had some really good players in high school, but for some reason those three people just stuck out in my head. And Kevin, it was almost like he And I guess he did. He studied the game or
He
whatever, you
studied.
know. And that's what I asked Dad. I was like, yeah, I bet you he spent months just like
Oh,
researching and just like
so in our house we've got 3 bedrooms, one for him and I, and then another for Annie, and the third one is his
disc
disc
golf.
golf slash
Is
gaming
it
room.
full?
Oh
I bet it
man,
was.
like at this point, it's wall to wall of discs, and he had built gaming. He was big on video gaming
Yeah,
too. He
yeah.
built his entire own PC, like studied, and that when you said studied, he would get Saturdays was a big day for him. He would get online and just watch videos of disc golf. Disc golf was always playing. He was constantly looking up the new discs,
Yeah.
looking up the new releases, constantly trying to better himself in his games. If there was something that he was interested in, he would study every aspect of it around, see what the best of the best was to do or get, and he would get it.
Yeah.
Whether he had to save up or whatever, you know, like his PC. He saved up for 2 years for that thing, man.
Yeah, those things are expensive.
Oh my gosh, and he has all the rope lights, and I mean, it, you know, it's like a
So,
disco party in
yeah,
there, you
I
know,
bet
and
it
he
is.
loved it. Like
Yeah.
that was just, he was proud of it. It was
Yeah.
something, and he knew what he was doing, and he was like that in every aspect of life.
Yeah. So he finally gives in and
Yeah,
says, okay.
so he finally gives in, and we're going on these, you know, dates out of town, because you know,
Right,
we don't
yeah.
we don't want anybody to know what's going on. We have private lives.
Right.
And the next thing you know, I start staying the night at his house. And somebody from that church drove by and saw my car there and told the elders, and I was on a dance team for Jesus for a women's conference. And they came to me and was
Wait a
like,
minute.
hey, yeah, we were dancing for Jesus.
I danced like
Okay, so it was a women's conference.
okay.
And it was the leader of that. She was
I
like,
feel like this can go into a whole different podcast.
But
So-
I've got multiple different things that I could talk about. I've got a lot of content, but for this one, we'll
Yeah.
just keep it at that.
Yeah.
We kind of got busted out that I was staying the night at his house, and appropriately they did. They came to me and said, "Listen, you know, you are on a stage for the Lord. You truly need to do what's right," and I appreciate
Right,
that. That's
right.
great.
And that
they
makes sense. I
they
can
did
see
the
that.
right thing from a biblical standpoint. They did, and I'm so thankful that they did.
Yeah.
Had you asked me this 7 years ago, it might have been a little bit different. But today, had it not been for that, I would not have had my husband to ask me to marry him to fix the church problem. And that was the text message that he sent me to marry him.
He didn't like get out on one knee. It's just-
No, you know,
I
Kevin
know.
was not
In
getting
true
on
Maxfield
any
fashion.
In true Maxfield fashion, I am raising the blinds 2 days after this conversation. I'm just sick. I'm not a confrontational person. I
Right.
don't enjoy confrontation. And I'm thinking, oh, these people think we're sinners. I was just falling asleep at his house, and now they, you
Right.
know. But it all boiled down to I'm pulling down the blinds to start the morning at 8 o'clock at Anna Mae's, looking over for Kevin's truck because I could always see it parked
Right.
over at the detention center. And I looked down at my phone, and he texted me, and he said, I think I know how we can fix the church problem. And I said, well, how's that? And he said, we can just get married. And when people hear that, they're like mortified, right?
See,
But to me,
yeah.
it
I
was
could
just
see
Kevin.
that. Like it. Yeah. That's
It was
how
just Kevin. And I said, you're kidding. And he said, absolutely not. And I said, let's get married. So we went through 6 weeks of premarital counseling.
Okay.
And
Was that by choice or was that through the?
well, we wanted to be married from people through the church,
Okay.
and in order to do like how they do
They
it,
have theirs.
you have to go through premarital counseling just
Okay.
to kind of see, you know, are you compatible? Do you know everything about the other one?
Right,
You know, is
right.
this something that God has willed for you to do?
How did that go? Like, you know, being with the age gap, was that like a?
That, you know, honestly, and I don't know if it's just because everybody there knew me and
Right.
knew him. I don't know, but it really wasn't, you know.
That's good.
We were in love, whatever, get married.
Yeah.
It's fine as long as, you know, you understand your beliefs are the same and that whole thing, equally yoked. And so we did. We went through the premarital counseling. It was the end of March. It's coming up actually 7 years since we got engaged. And so we had to wait a little bit out, and then we did the 6 weeks, and we ended up getting married July the 28th of 2018. And We got married on my parents' front porch on Nunswitch down there. We had a huge...
That's so funny because that's where I grew up on was Nunswitch. Like,
yeah, out there in the holler.
Out there
That's
in the
where
middle of
my
nowhere.
mama and my papa, Anna Mae, that's where
Yep.
she grew up. Matt Toon down in the holler
Yeah.
down there. And he wanted a small wedding. I obviously did not, so we compromised and had a big wedding.
yeah.
And so, but, you know, it was very down home.
Yeah.
But all of our most special people were there, and you know, that was the beginning. That was the beginning. And soon after we got married the end of July. I found out that we were pregnant with our first child the beginning
Right.
of November, Annie. And Annie was born July 30th of 2019.
Oh, wow.
So she was born 2 days after our first
Yeah.
anniversary.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Annie she's a hoot.
She is.
I watch her, like, I love when you post videos of her singing because she is just
She
like,
loves
she's a
to sing.
star. Like,
Thank you.
and I didn't even know you could sing
Yeah.
until,
Yeah.
like, I
It's a Davis thing.
across-
It's
yeah.
on my dad's side. Now, my mom, and you were talking about earlier, you knew my mom's
Yeah.
parents, Eddie and Faye Martin. They lived in Sullivan down here, but he could play anything he picked up. Papa could
Yeah.
pick up anything. My Nana can sing like a bird. I remember hearing her at Rosebud Methodist Church growing up. I can
remember.
still
Yep.
hear her singing. But my dad's side, we're all the vocal side, all the different harmonies, and I was born into it. And Annie, she was born being able to hold and carry
I think
a tune.
Annie was born to be a star.
She
is
listen.
just something else. Like,
Thank you.
she is. She's
so
I love
special.
watching her videos.
Thank
like,
you.
yeah.
Well, she
you need
loves
more
it.
of them.
And
Well,
I grew up playing sports. Kevin grew up playing sports. My dad and all of them, they were all number 25 on everything, you know. But Annie, I don't know that she's going to play sports, and I'm going to allow her to do whatever she wants to do. But she is so, like, she's learning to play piano right now.
Oh, that's cool.
At CPAS, Crowder Performing Arts Studio. Give them a little plug. They're phenomenal people. Michelle and Corey Crowder, they're amazing.
Okay.
She is learning how to play piano and just sings and loves theater, and she wants to start dance. And I'm just like, baby, I'm going to be a theater mom. I don't
let's
care.
do it all.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. You know,
Yeah.
you do what God's created you to do,
Yeah.
and He's obviously given her that gift. So
it's
that's incredible.
it's really cool to watch her sing, and then again watching you sing too. So Annie comes along.
Annie comes along.
Kevin is
And Kevin and I, you know, we're doing the lifestyle of parenting and you know, marriage and work and everything. He, like I said, he was the chaplain at the local jail in town, and that was truly, looking back now, his life mission was to pour into those that everyone else had turned away. And
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. You know, knowing Kevin, growing up with Kevin. Kevin's one of my best friends growing up, and you know, I've told you a story about, you know, him spending the night and this whole skunk situation, and I tell everybody that. But he was always good.
Yeah.
Like, he was always somebody, like, you know, and you grow and you separate and you don't stay in contact as much. And then he kind of came back in with Dad and Teresa, and then it was just, I was like, oh man, he's kind of like my brother-in-law or whatever, you know, however that works.
Yep.
Which was cool. And I'd see him every now and then, but again, you know, life's busy or whatever. And I'll never forget. He told me one time, he's like, "I'm only just a phone call away."
Yeah.
He said, or a message away.
And
he
he
said,
meant
"I'm
that,
all
too.
yeah, I'm always going to be there."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really cool. That's Kevin couldn't really sing.
No,
Kevin couldn't
no,
sing.
he could not hold a tune in a bucket. He
I
was doing
remember-
that. But he could play guitar.
He could play guitar. And
He
you
could
know
play
what?
guitar.
You know the funny thing is, I'd go spend the night at his house, and Richard would play. Before he'd leave for work, he'd be like, "Check this out," and he'd play. And then he would leave for work, and I'd always just go over and stare at his guitar, because Richard always has some nice guitars.
Mm-hmm.
And I never seen Kevin play the guitar. Never knew he could play the guitar until, like, probably, I guess Dad told me a year or so before he passed away.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
He had a guitar underneath his bed in there
Yeah.
in the game room, and he'd pull it out and pick every now and then, and I'd be like, dude, like, we need, you know, because growing up in church, it was like this whole thing. My uncles and their wives, like, they'd get up and sing. And in my mind, that's the epitome. Like, you've made it. When you and your husband can get up at a church service and be like, here we are.
Yeah.
God use us together. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But, you know. So, yeah, Kevin, he was big on the let's find people who everybody else has wrote off and make them feel like they're special.
Yeah.
That was how he operated. And so he starts in at the detention center. He's the chaplain there, but then he started doing parenting classes. He was an educator there. Him and his friend Crystal Brantley, they were the two educators there, and made a lot of differences in a lot of lives. I mean, they absolutely, there are still people to this day. One of Kevin's best friends in life is a gentleman that he met while he was incarcerated, while the man was incarcerated. Cool. And he's actually the man that Kevin wants to walk Annie down the aisle.
Aww.
So, I mean, that's it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big deal. Kevin never looked at anyone who was incarcerated as an incarcerated person.
Kevin never looked down on anyone. Like,
ever.
I can remember a time I don't even know what we were doing, just cruising town or something, and I don't remember who was with us. It may have just been me and him, and I think there was somebody else with us, because they made a comment about somebody, and Kevin just stopped. He's like, not in this car, you're not.
Yeah.
And it was like, everybody's got a past. Everybody's got this and this, and he was like, we're not going to do that.
Often.
And he would. And I can't remember him ever having a bad word to say. And he would take up for somebody in a heartbeat. Like,
100%. The underdog, especially.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that stems, and we'll get into this too, but a lot of that stems from how Kevin was raised,
right,
what Kevin dealt with, and that sort of thing. But, he loved everyone, and he saw people. And, people will say this about people, but I can genuinely say for my husband, he saw people how God sees people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He did not judge anyone for anything.
Yeah.
And it had a lot to do with the fact that, Kevin had a past.
Yeah.
And he was not that person.
Right.
Therefore, you bring it to the future, anyone can change. Everyone has the opportunity to change. And so, yeah, he was incredible. He really was when it came to that aspect. So, yeah, he starts working at the jail, making differences there. I was waiting tables until I had Annie, and then I ended up going into the health field for a little while until COVID hit. And then once COVID came around, I came home and started working for the Crittenden Press, which is actually where I am now as a journalist. And yeah, life was just kind of going all normal. But it wasn't up until Kevin decided that the jail was not where he wanted to stay forever,
right,
that things really started to shift in our lives. He ended up leaving the jail and coming home to do seal coating.
Mm-hmm.
And he started his seal coating business with Doug Campbell originally. They had GTG.
Oh, Doug.
Oh,
yeah.
Doug boy, yeah. Him and Doug started GTG, glory to God, sealing and asphalt repair. And then about a year went into that, and they were like, listen, we are better as friends and not as business
partners. Let's
not
work together.
Yeah, I love you, but I'm out. So Kevin left and started Max Corp, and Doug kept GTG, and so, but they still helped each other, it was good. And so Kevin started his first big business, Max Corp, LLC, and he started seal coating in the summer of 2023 on his own, and made a lot of good connections, and he really enjoyed it. Kevin was always the breadwinner for our family. I was kind of just like in the background.
Kevin was a hustler. He's always been a hustler.
Dude, the man, he would work.
Yeah.
There was never, and in the beginning stages, he did the whole Dave Ramsey plan, and he had it all figured out, and then I come in and I'm like, let's get married, let's have a kid,
Yeah.
And so like all this is going on, and I never went without. Ever. I mean, we never went without, even scraping the bottom of the barrel. And it was because he was such a hard worker.
Yeah.
He would get out and he would do whatever he had to do, whether it was side jobs or side hustles, whatever he had to do, he did it to make sure that we were taken care of. Our bills were paid.
That's funny. He would do the same thing when I spend the night. He'd be like, hey, here's a couple of bucks. Make sure you get you something extra at school.
Dude,
that's just
whether
he had it or not. That's
the most incredible person. And God blessed me in showing me a real man.
We're talking a lot about Kevin too, but I'm gonna tell you something. Just knowing Kevin, like, you had to be pretty special too for him to kind of just, because Maxfield was Maxfield, and honestly, I never really, I knew he was always super picky, like about relationships, and when he got into a relationship, he took them really seriously.
Yeah.
And I thought at one time, I said, I don't think this dude's ever going to find somebody and get married. He's
He had
so.
accepted,
I mean, it's got to say a lot about you too.
Thank
so
you. We talked a lot about it, and he had accepted being alone. He had accepted, he was okay with it. He didn't have a problem with it, and that was something else he liked to say. He was just living his life. He was doing fine, and then I just showed up, and that's kind of and he also said, it was going to take somebody that chased him down.
So you showing up in his life, how do you think that changed his course, or do you think it changed his course?
It changed everything for him. It changed everything for him. When he came back from Haiti before we got married, he was ready to sell everything that he had and go and move down with Matt that was in Haiti. And that's absolutely the truth. He was ready to sell everything he had and go live on top of a mountain in Haiti and minister to these children.
Yeah.
And I say minister, not even in the sense of preaching to these children, just helping these people.
There. Right.
That was Kevin's thing. Kevin showed the love of God with his hands and his feet. He showed that he was a Christian, not by speaking that he was a Christian all the time. You know what I'm saying? He just lived it.
Right.
He did not take it serious when people spoke about, and they had no action.
Yeah, Kevin was very much an action.
He was very much an action, very much an acts of service type of words of. Yeah. I'm words of affirmation. He was acts of service in our love languages, and we had our things in our marriage. It was hard. It's in some aspects because I needed praise, and he was like, shut up and do it. You know what I mean?
You need to look at me every now and then.
But we did get that figured out. We got that figured out before it all went down. But so anyway, he started a seal coating business, and all is well. We've got money for the first time, actual money in the bank for the first time in our entire marriage. And Kevin starts working at Wing Haven, which is a hunting lodge with Russell and Michelle Edwards. He was working for them for a while, and they are phenomenal. I cannot. And they never want anybody to sing their praises because they're just very humble people. But I can't sing their praises enough because they are like family, and we're like family to him. But anyway, he's working there. He's hustling in the winter. He's hustling in the summer. Everything's going on. And Kevin starts feeling sick. And Kevin was never sick. Kevin did not go to the doctor. He was not the type to take vitamins. He was not the type to do anything. He just lived. He was very active. He played disc golf. He rode bikes. He went running. I mean, he was in the gym. He was constantly researching about all of the supplements and everything he could take as far as drinking stuff for the gym. You know what I mean? Like he was all in on taking care of himself. He's a big guy.
Right.
Big old, but the Maxfields are anyway.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, but Kevin starts, and it started out as like, man, my stomach hurts. I got heartburn. You know what I mean? But he just kept going. Like he didn't want to really.
He would acknowledge it, but he would just
he would acknowledge it, but he wouldn't really fixate himself on it. Well, I come from a hypochondriac family.
Okay, we call it Perkinitis in my family.
Perkinitis, okay?
Yeah.
And no offense to anybody, and I mean that wholeheartedly. But the first ache, it's like, oh dear Lord, but Kevin wasn't like that, so he just keeps on. Well, New Year's Eve rolls around 2023, and he's like, dude, I gotta go to the doctor. And I'm like, it is New Year's Eve, and he's like, I don't feel good. So we go to Livingston County ER, and they do some scans on him, and his stomach is just so large, and the nurse practitioner there is like, dude, I have never seen anything like this in my life, And Kevin's like, well, what do we do? And he said, well, we'll do a scope for you, and but we can't do it until next week because it's the holidays. Right. And he's like, so come back next Wednesday, whatever. Long story short, we go in for the EGD, the endoscopy, and he ends up, they put the scope in, and he aspirates. And they sucked out 1 liter of fluid, but he aspirated another liter into his lungs.
Oh, wow.
And they have him on a vent. And, I was there as his ride type deal, wife, just there ready to get him home. And go on about life. But it stopped us in our tracks, man. I mean, it absolutely stopped us in our tracks.
So it turned in as an ER visit, scope,
yeah.
and okay, we'll go do this test and go home.
Yeah.
And
we'll see what's up. It could be all sorts of things.
Right.
And
that's not how it happened.
Kevin's 45 years old, healthy, former smoker, but
Right. He smoked them Marlboro Lights.
And that's
I
it,
think.
man. But you know what I'm saying? Y'all were young.
Yeah.
He's a distinguished member of society now that
Yeah,
doesn't smoke in public. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
But anyway, like he's aspirated, and I'll never forget the anesthesiologist actually cleaned her house for her. So she calls me because I'm out in the car. It had been like 2 hours, and I'm like calling on my friends, and I'm like, man, this is supposed to be a scope. Like, what's up?
Right.
Look down, the anesthesiologist is calling me. She's like, where are you at? And I'm like, I'm out in the parking lot. What's up? And she's like, get in here. So I go in there. They take me in through the ER, and I'll never forget, Kevin was sitting up in the bed, and he's just like breathing so hard, and I look up at him, and I'm just like, what is going on? And they're like, we've had this accident that's happened, and we need to put him back on the ventilator, and he's refusing. And so I'm just shaking in my,
right.
Like 27 years old. I've never dealt with anything like this. Kevin ended up having, he had factor V Leiden, which is a blood deficiency, blood disorder. And he had some blood clots that he threw when Annie was a month old. And he was in the hospital for a week back then, but then they found out that it was a blood disorder, and, we worked through all that. But I had never dealt with anything like a ventilator with my spouse,
right. Yeah.
And so I'm just like, baby, and I got up close to him, and I'm like, baby, if they're telling you need to be on a ventilator, like, you need to be on a ventilator. And he was like, I just need to catch my breath, and they need to leave me alone. Like, he's furious, right? Yeah. He's absolutely furious. And I'm just like, okay, Kevin didn't cuss. He did not have a dirty mouth, and he's like on the verge.
Hey, I don't even remember Kevin cussing when we were younger, every once in a while, and it wouldn't be anything,
No, he did not cuss. He did not have a foul mouth, and he had no time for it. He didn't judge anybody, but as far as his own life, unless he was just so furious that he would lose it off the handle.
I can remember 2 times.
He didn't do that, and that was one of the best things about him too. But anyway, he's furious, he's angry, and I'm just like, y'all need to leave him alone. And our neighbor, our ex-neighbor, she didn't live beside us at the time, but her and her husband had just moved, Taylor Crabtree now. Sorry. She's like, have y'all ever thought about like BiPAP? What about a BiPAP? Let's just try that. And so they were like, okay, well, they put him on the BiPAP, and he's all right. He's obviously got a lot of stuff going on in his lung. He's got all the stuff going on in his lungs, but they got him on the BiPAP, and finally we called somebody in there, and I was like, we need to get him out of here. Like, thank y'all for all you've done, but it's time to move on, Yeah. And so they ended up life-flighting him to Madisonville, and he was in the CCU in Madisonville for a few days. And then I just started harping on him. We had some friends that had connections with people at St. Thomas in Nashville, and so we ended up getting him transferred to St. Thomas, and he was down there for a week. They did a scope on him down there. At this point, it had been 18 days, and he had no food or anything. He'd lost a ton of weight at that point. They do a scope. They don't see anything. You're good. Just ends up that your duodenum was blocked for whatever reason, and you can go home. And so we're like, cool, So we come home. Fast forward to my birthday, February, the next month. Same stuff. Sick, just felt like he was full, stomach protruding, the whole deal. And we ended up going to Madisonville for that one, and they stented open his duodenum. Same thing happened. And at that point in time, they ran scans. We thought maybe it was his gallbladder, and moving forward, we'll talk about this, but what Kevin had going on, it's very, very frequently missed. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things that they just don't go straight to believing that it could have anything to do with the pancreas. But they did see it on a scan, a mass on his pancreas, and they believed that it had something to do with the scar tissue because of the surgery that he had with the stenting of his duodenum. So, long story short, they sent us home. And it was about 2.5 months before he started getting sick again. And at that point, May came around. May the 19th, he was put into the hospital, and they did a scan and saw that the mass that they believed was scar tissue was actually a tumor on his pancreas.
So originally they thought the mass was just
Scar tissue. Yeah. And I had a cousin who was 45 years old, Chris Brantley. I don't know if you remember Chris.
So Chris, so when we lived on Nunswich, we actually bought Miss Brantley's house. Junior lived here.
Junior was my mama's brother.
Okay.
Yep.
So we lived right next door to them
Gotcha.
in the little gray house. I don't know who lives there now. I feel like they may have painted it pink at one time. I don't know.
Wouldn't be surprised.
But anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, we moved from the hill. We called it McDowell Hill. Where Guy Thurman and all of them lived at, right across from I think Larry Brantley or
Larry Curtis.
Curtis, that's it. So up that hill, we lived there. So we bought that house, and we lived there for years. And we would, I know this is a little off subject, but we would go across the field to Miss Brantley's, and she'd always give us like snack cakes, or she'd have something she'd bake.
Sounds
She always
like
took
it.
care of us.
Yep.
And there was Shane and Erica and Barry. I seen Barry's got a little family now.
4 kids,
I
man.
know.
They are just the sweetest little
And I'm
things.
sorry, Barry, if you watch this, I never would have guessed that you would have done that, buddy. I'm proud of
He's
you.
a good
So
guy,
anyway,
man.
but yeah, so the whole Nunswich thing. Anyway,
Yeah, so Chris lived on Nunswich, or his parents live on Nunswich,
Yes.
and my parents actually, where they live, Chris and Laura lived all the way across the way, and then Rochelle and her husband lived in the middle of that in a cabin. So it was kind of like, see, we're all cousins with all those, with all of them. So Chris gets sick. Chris gets diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in October of 2023, and he passed away the week that Kevin went back to the doctor in May. I was actually going to Chris's funeral with my dad and Uncle David the day that Kevin got transferred from Madisonville to Louisville, and I wasn't able to go to his funeral. And so, like, we had seen Chris's journey. A lot of red flags in our journey that I ultimately, in the back of my mind, I was like, please, God, no.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Don't let this be, because you think about it and you're like, there's no way. There's no way that this can happen to us. But unfortunately, that was the case. And so Kevin gets life flighted to Louisville, and they end up putting him under the next day for a Whipple procedure. And anyone in the health field, anyone with any GI problems, when you hear Whipple procedure, you know it's serious, because it's basically like a gastric bypass on steroids, and they're taking out all kinds of stuff that, God gave us. So it's like, but they do the Whipple procedure, and the whole time we're just, because here's the thing. Had they got in there for the Whipple procedure and taken out this tumor, it could have very well saved his life. And the real downside about it is they got in there and it had spread into a couple of lymph nodes in his stomach lining, which pegged it as stage 4, and there was nothing else that they were able to do. And had they done it back in January, had they done it back in February, it's very, very likely that the Whipple procedure would have done what it needed to do, and Kevin would be here today. And so that was something,
So how did that make both of you feel? Like, did he know that?
Yeah.
So how did that?
So Kevin woke up from surgery, and, he was out for quite some time. It was a very extensive surgery, and they ended up just giving him, like, the gastric bypass. It was a Whipple procedure, but they weren't able to go through the full thing.
Right.
So basically, like a gastric bypass. And so anyway, it was a successful surgery because Kevin wasn't able to eat before this. He was just puking every time. He was vomiting every time that he ate. So it gave him the ability to be able to eat, and that was the big thing, because Kevin was an eater.
Kevin loved food.
He wanted to eat, and obviously you need to eat.
Right.
And so when he woke up from surgery, we were all there. It was myself, my dad, my Uncle David, my Uncle Charlie, and then my daughter's Annie's godparents, Marlon, Daryl Manning. They were there too, and Joe, Kevin's best friend, Joe Harrison.
Joey.
Joey. Joey was there too. God love him.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
He's a good friend of my Kevin. Yeah. But anyway, so we were all there, and the doctor called me. This was before Kevin woke up. The doctor called me and said, listen, here's the deal. And he's a very kind man. He's a very nice man, but he sees this stuff all the time, and he calls and he's like, I wasn't able to get the tumor. It spread to his stomach lining. And I'm like, okay, and I've done enough Google. I've been on MD, WebMD enough that I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what I'm saying? Right. And Joey's wife is a nurse at the oncology unit up here, and they knew what was going on too.
Right.
And I'll never forget whenever I got that call. I was actually in the bathroom. The only time I'd been in the bathroom, 5 hours that we'd been there, I'm in the bathroom and get this call. And so I walk back in there and I tell them. And I'll never forget Joey looking at me, and I looked at him, and all I could get out of my mouth was, "I'm so sorry." And, looking back, he told me, he was like, "I should be comforting you."
Right,
you know what I
right.
mean? But I was just so horrified. And in my mind's eye, I knew the journey that we were about to embark on. And I was so scared. Thank God my daddy and my Uncle David and my Uncle Charlie and Daryl and Marla, and Joey were all there with me, because we prayed and, we found peace. When Kevin woke up, we prayed in that room. And I told him, I said, they weren't able to get it. They weren't able to get it, but it's going to be okay. And he said, "Oh, yeah." And everybody, we were all just overcome with a peace. But I'll never forget Annie's godmother, Marla, looked at Kevin, and she was crying, and he said, "Don't cry. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fine." And he said, "We're going to give it all we got." And so that was kind of the place that we were at Louisville. And so we were there for a week, and it was a very long recovery time, you know. And everybody started talking about chemo, and everybody started talking about radiation, and Kevin was just against it from the beginning. But we wanted to hear the options, and so, but we had to wait until he recovered. We had to wait for all that. And
so how long did it take him to recover from that?
It was about a 2-month recovery.
I thought it was a long time. I can remember. I remember Dad. I think he called me and told me that kind of they got the diagnosis or whatever. And I think I even may have, and it was a couple of months later, I reached out to Kevin, I think. But yeah, so the diagnosis comes. Has it came at this point?
So they actually
they
never told us what the diagnosis was until a doctor came into the room. I was asleep on the couch, and Kevin, he was in shock for the first couple days.
Yeah.
Okay, he was in shock, just like, he could finally breathe again. He could finally have a little bit of solids again. So he was kind of in the shock place. But then I was laying down, and Kevin had a doctor come into the room. And he said, "Can someone tell me what's going on?
Right.
Nobody's told me what I've got. Nobody's said, anything." And the doctor said, "Well, it's pancreatic cancer." And Kevin said, "Well, what stage, And he said, "Well, it's advanced. It's stage 4, And in Kevin's mind, he's like, "Okay, I know what it is now."
So let's fix it.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where he was.
Well, let's take a break real quick.
Yeah.
Let's take a break, and then we'll come back.
That sounds
we'll pick
good.
up.
I'll save you a seat next to me. You're always at the table. Hope you're proud of what you see. Watching with the angels. You're written in my soul. It's your blood that I bleed. Wherever you are, wherever I'll be, I'll save you.
All right, so we're back. So he finally gets his diagnosis.
So Kevin gets his diagnosis, and I came back home. Annie, like I was talking about earlier, Annie's in with CPAS, and they have their piano recital every quarter.
Yeah, so let's go back to that. Let's go back to so Annie is here during this whole process.
Annie's with my mom and daddy, and because Kevin was in the hospital for a couple weeks in January,
Right.
and then he was in the hospital for a couple weeks in February, Annie had kind of just started going to mom and dad's, and she loves Mammy and Pappy.
Just vacationing.
She's loving it. She loves mom and dad. She loves being there. This
Right.
is party all time high for Annie. See y'all later. See you when you get back. And up until this point, my mom, I can remember mom just saying, you just get him fixed. Just get him fixed, and we got her. And so we kind of just hit this wall, because up until this, it was we're going to get through this. God's going to take care of this. God's going to take care of this. He's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. Let's just do what we need to do. And something that I wanted to mention too, and it's important because of the community involvement that we'll talk about. But, whenever Kevin first got sick in January, our finances were struggling because Kevin was really struggling to work,
Right.
and like I said, he was the primary breadwinner there. So I was doing everything that I can do, but I could only do so much because I was also having to take care of Annie,
Right.
and so whenever we got to Madisonville in May, before they saw that the tumor had grown, we had $11 in our bank account. $11 is all we had to our name. And the entire time that Kevin was sick, I did not have to work a single day because of what the community did
That's
for
awesome.
us, and it was just, the outpouring of love was insane. I've never seen anything like it. But anyway, so Kevin is at the hospital in Louisville. I came home for Annie because she had a piano recital, and that was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, because Kevin was in the hospital, and it had already started, kind of word had gotten back into town,
Yes.
that Kevin was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and which is pegged as a death sentence anyway.
Right,
And so
right.
it was one of those things that, I was proud of our baby, and I was there for our baby, for both of us.
Yeah.
And it was that first experience that I had to have to do that alone. Not really alone. My parents were there, and my
Right,
grandmother,
but
but just
without
from the
Kevin.
standpoint
Yeah.
without Kevin. And, but we smiled through it, and everybody was mortified, and God just gave me the strength to do it. Everybody made comments. I don't know how you're doing this. I don't know how you're getting through this. God alone is the only reason that Kevin and I were able to survive what we went through,
Right.
and that I have been able to survive after him. But anyway, so we get home, and they wanted to put Kevin through chemo and radiation pretty much as fast as they could, about a month in. So we went to Evansville and saw an oncologist, Dr. Ridenhour, Dr. Kevin Ridenhour. He is a phenomenal man, very, very kind man, who gave us some options. And Kevin just did not want to go the conventional route. He had no desire to. He had a cousin that had passed away from leukemia. Anna Catherine was her name. And Anna died, and it was a very, very brutal death for her. And so Kevin's whole mentality was just quality over quantity.
And that's something that I've noticed, and I guess it's the good versus evil or whatever it is. But somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, okay, and it's almost like the treatment is what kills them.
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of the times.
You know what I mean? It's like you're healthy, and the only reason why you have cancer or this diagnosis is because it's either accidentally found or like, okay, I've been sick for a little while, nothing that I can't handle, but I need to go check it out, right?
Yeah.
So you still have a quality of life, but then it's like, okay, you got this cancer, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And then your quality of life just goes downhill because you can't do anything.
Well,
You know what I mean?
basically, what chemotherapy does, and this is not a slight at conventional medicine whatsoever.
It attacks.
But your immune system is completely ripped away from you,
Yeah.
and with that, your body just completely it's depleted of everything that you have in it to fight off anything.
Right.
And there are so many people that, they're fighting the cancer, and then they get something else, and it just absolutely knocks them out to the point that they can't come back from it. And that was Kevin's thing. He did not want to live that life. And so with Chris, with my cousin and everything, that he went the conventional route, he went to MD Anderson. He fought hard, and a long, hard fight. And it was excruciating on him, his family, and everything else. And, we had witnessed that. And so Kevin just said, I'm going to live the best quality of life that I can for as long as I can. And so many people in our circle, so many people from our outer circle couldn't understand that, because he was 45 and
Right.
he had a young wife, he had a young child, he had all of these things. Why wouldn't you do everything that you possibly could?
How many times have you have you ever second guessed that?
Honestly, I haven't. And I'll get into that in a minute, and I'll tell you why. But
Okay.
I know that God's plan was fulfilled in this. And I don't understand, obviously, the whole cycle, but I know.
So I say this. I always say everything happens for a reason. Do you believe that?
100%.
Do you like? Okay.
100%.
All right.
I don't know why Kevin had to go so early, but I do know that his life was fulfilled. And so Kevin chooses not to do chemo. And I start getting calls from people.
So he how does that make you feel that he's decided that? What's going through your mind?
So prior to Kevin being diagnosed, I got a phone call from someone who is very, very educated in natural homeopathic type of medicine. And they tell me, when they get, this was prior to his surgery, when they get in there, they'll find more than they saw on a scan. And I'm going to send you some information. It is a natural way to combat cancer. And I want you all to pray about this. Obviously, you do what you want to do, but I want you to look into this. And, Chris had passed away from pancreatic cancer. One of Kevin's good friends, Robert Brandon, had passed away from pancreatic cancer. They rode bikes together for years. They were good friends. Pancreatic cancer, it's one of the toughest ones because your pancreas filters everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one of those things that if you get pancreatic cancer and it is not found in the very earliest stages, no matter what, not saying that people can't live from it.
Right.
Not saying that they can't beat it in later stages. However, the odds are just like ridiculous.
It's almost like one of the worst.
Yeah, it is. It is. Pancreatic cancer is one of the worst cancers to have. But I get this message from this person, and they're basically like, I'm going to send you this link, and it was about the Gerson Institute in Tijuana, Mexico.
Okay, let's go below the border.
We're going below the border, and we did. We went below the border. But we didn't do that. We started out, Kevin gets his strength back. He's riding 7 miles a day on his bicycle with, stage 4 pancreatic cancer patient. He's riding all over town in his biker gear, and everybody's just like, what is going on with this guy? Like, how is he doing it? And we had such a following. Like, people were coming out of the woodworks, man. They're like, what are you all doing? So basically what we did, we cut out all meat out of his diet. Okay. Cut out all carbs out of his diet. Started him on juicing.
So you cutting all that out. What is that? What's the reasoning behind cutting that?
Well, the reason, your pancreas, like I said, it filters everything, but it processes proteins, and meat proteins are a whole lot harder to process than from a vegetable protein. And so there's so much that goes into it, man. Like, we were adding garlic into his diet, and sometimes whenever he wasn't getting the calorie intake that he needed to take, it was just like, well, how are we going to make sure that he's getting what he needs? But the big thing was juicing. Kevin loved juicing already prior to him getting sick, and so we just really, carrots, man, I hope I never have to juice another carrot in my life, honestly, because it was just, but I researched until I just couldn't. And I was telling you all ago, I mean, it was something I applied myself. I just wanted him to live. And, he wanted to live. And I drove myself crazy. I'm glad you got these Kleenexes because I could feel it.
Yeah, Mandy's mom got those from someone. They go in your car like your cup holder.
That makes sense. I should really invest
just keep
in that.
You some.
But, I absolutely... we went into this with the mindset that we are going to beat this thing, whether you live or die. We're beating this thing. It's not going to define who you are. It's not going to define who we are. You're going to live the best possible quality of life that there is. And so there was no stone left unturned. There was no stone left unturned. We researched the best supplements, man. He was on all kinds of supplements. A big thing with the Gerson diet and treatment is coffee enemas. I mean, it was just like the wildest stuff ever. Yeah. But we were willing to do whatever. Kevin was willing to do whatever. And, looking back, Kevin, we had one argument the entire time that he was sick. And it all stemmed from, it was a week before Annie's 5th birthday.
Maxie's, he was pretty stubborn sometimes.
Oh.
Like, even at the front, he was stubborn.
He was the most stubborn human being
Right.
alive, man.
That's what I was,
Yeah.
like, so just 2 arguments. That's pretty good.
No, we well, one argument the whole time he was sick, and it all stemmed. It was Annie's birthday week, and you're married. You know how it is when a wife has something on their mind. Anyway, they're just kind of spacey sometimes. But it was a week before Annie's birthday. I was getting everything ready and prepared for a 5th birthday party. Summer pool party. She's got the best month to have a birthday. I was born in February, so I never got a pool party, but she gets one every year. You know. And so I'm planning all the decorations, and I'm planning all the food, and I'm planning all the people, and the presents, and all this and that and this and that and the other. And the most important thing of all of it was the fact that I knew that it was probably the last birthday that Kevin would get to see her.
Right.
And I'm just, cleaning up the house, trying to get food cooked. I was cooking meals 3 meals a day, snacks, the whole bit. I'm learning how to make stuff that people don't even, like lentil tacos. You know what I'm saying? And they tasted like real tacos, man. He loved them. But I'm like, Chris beat cancer books. Chris Wark, dude is wild, beats stage 3 colon cancer, completely off juicing, no conventional medicine. Like, I'm telling you, dude, I was like, you're beating this thing. And Kevin's just sitting there and he's like, I have no doubts in your ability. This is the fight. I have no doubts in your ability, but I want you to understand something. There is a very large chance that I am not going to live through this. And you need to accept that. And I said, you don't think I don't freaking know that? But he knew. And we're in this age of life where people think that you can speak and have it. Right. You have what you say, and it stems from the Bible verse, the power of life and death is in your tongue. And I agree with it to an extent, but we don't have the creative power to make someone live just because. You know what I'm saying? There is a plan. Yeah. Way above anything that any of us could ever understand, there is a plan. My husband fought to the end, to the last second of his life, and I'll tell you about that after a while. But he fought to live. But Kevin knew where he was going to go and where he was going to spend eternity. There was no doubt in his mind that when he died, he was going to open his eyes in death to see face to face with our Lord and Savior. And I selfishly wanted so much for him to stay here. But that wasn't in the cards. And so we did the things at home. The eating and the, supplements and the ivermectin and I hope that doesn't get you flagged. But all the things, you know what I'm saying? Like we did all the things. And the tumor started to shrink.
Hey, and I don't want to interrupt you because this is getting good. So my mom has just been diagnosed with adenocarcinoma.
Which is what Kevin had, by the way, pancreatic adenocarcinoma.
She has in her lungs and in her lymph nodes, and it's inoperable. It's like right here or whatever. And a friend of mine that I'm part of a hunting group with, and we're actually I haven't even met him in person yet, just over Facebook and text and phone calls. His dad is like stage 4, and Nick, sorry if I get this wrong, but I think it's stage 4 bladder cancer. And somebody that they know was like, "Hey, try this," and it's a dog wormer.
Fenbendazole?
Maybe. And forgive me, guys, for getting on my phone while I'm doing this, but let me because I want to see this because I want you to know this. So he was like, "Hey, dude, this is what my dad's on." This is what it is. Here it is. Panicure C.
Yeah, underneath that, fenbendazole.
I didn't even read that. So, yeah, that's
I'm not trying to correct you. That's it.
So anyway, he said so he's been on this, and he's like, he's good.
I'm telling you,
he's in remission.
So here's the deal. Here's the deal with the fenbendazole and the ivermectin. And I don't say this to slight Kevin in any way. He hated taking pills. He hated doing anything. Yeah. We got him started on it. The tumor started to shrink, and he quit taking it. And tumor came back, and it spread.
Started this stuff. It basically started going away, and it came back.
Okay. And people will hear that, and they'll think, why? Why would he do that? But here's the thing. There were so many people, so many mouths, so many, oh my gosh, why aren't you taking chemo? Why aren't you doing this? That it got to the point where Kevin was just like, I got pancreatic cancer, and everybody's saying I'm going to die, and I'm going to live out my life. I'm tired of taking pills. I'm tired of doctor's visits. I'm tired of everything. I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
But yes, 100%, yes. Look into it, get into it. Yeah. Because there are people. And if Kevin was here right now, he'd be like, here she goes. Because there were so many people that would come in our house, and I would be like, yes, 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 yes. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that chemo and radiation are not great.
Right,
there
absolutely.
are people, it saves lives, obviously. But for what we dealt with, and a lot of the stage 4 people, I mean, there are people that are beating cancer from a natural standpoint.
That's the thing, though. When you hit stage 4,
it's quality of life.
What else are you going to do?
It's quality of life.
So, you know, and I've always said that, you know, if that ever comes to me, stage 4, I'm living. Mm-hmm. I'm living. Hey, look. Me and Mandy's going to get a divorce, so she's not responsible. I'm going to get a bunch of credit cards, and I'm going to go do all this stuff that I'm going to jack these cards up. You know
what? We didn't get to the divorce part.
It's not the divorce. No, the divorce is so that she's not responsible for my debt, right? Yeah. So like I'm buying a P-51 Mustang, and I'm flying. You know what I mean? So
the intelligence level is there. I'm with you. And there's another plug. And put it on. Is it on me? Is the camera on me?
Let me put it on you.
Get a will. Okay, last will and testament, power of attorney, life insurance, now. I'm 28 years old. I never thought I would be in this position, but you need to do that. And you need to do it now. All right, you can move back to us.
So the will, like, did you have that in place?
Not before all this happened, but when he got diagnosed, and it was actually kind of crazy how it all happened, because I was saying things like, dude, we need life insurance, dude, we need, you know, power of attorney, last will and testament, where do you want to be buried?
I was saying, Maxfield's like, nah, we're good.
And I was saying this like before he got sick, and he's like, what is wrong with you? You know, like,
what are you plotting, woman?
Right, you know, like, who are you calling to do this? Like, you know, and I'm like, no, dude, like, these are things, these are comments, these are stuff it's important. Well, after he got diagnosed, I started in again, and he's like, well, he was sleeping so much because he's wore out. You know, he's got cancer, he's sleeping a lot, and I would have to call the doctor's offices to make the appointments and, you know, get the records to send to Gerson, and you know, San Diego is where their American headquarters is. And so, like, I'm trying to call these hospitals, I'm trying to call these offices, and their first question, are you the power of attorney? Are you the power of attorney? We need to talk to Mr. Maxfield. You're not the power of attorney. And finally I was like, Kevin, I am tired of having to wake you up because you haven't slept all night, you know. So that's kind of how I manipulated the system to get in there, you know. But I was like, look, dude, like, we have got to get this stuff lined out. And it was not, I mean, we went and seen Miss Rebecca Johnson uptown. She was phenomenal. She got everything done quickly. And now, I mean, even now that Kevin's gone, I have everything lined out that if something happens to me, you know, I know where Annie's going. I know where everything's going to be, you know, and it made the probate situation so much easier. I mean, it was just like, you know, it's not easy, period, but from the standpoint of making it easier, it just was, you know. And it's stuff people my age, people your age, we're not thinking about last will and testament, you know. We're not thinking about life insurance, but it is so crucial because things like this happen, and there's nothing that we can, it's not in our control. It's not in our control.
I mean, we could leave the house. I could go out there and check the mailbox, get smoked down by a semi, you know.
It's that simple. And tragedies happen every single day. It's a matter of trying to prepare. If something, God forbid, something happened, you're prepared. 100%.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about.
It's a lot to think about, and I would have never thought about it, but, you know.
Yeah, so you start these treatments. The tumor goes away. He stops taking the medication.
Well, the tumor goes down. It's still there, but the tumor starts shrinking, and we're like, oh, yeah, we're doing something good. And we just keep on, you know, he's taking the medicine, but just not as regular as possible. Right. Well, Kevin starts, it went from, I'm good, to, oh, man, I'm really not that good. And that pancreatic cancer, man, it's known for it. You start getting it to shrink, and it will come back with a vengeance, and it did. But up before we found out that it did, we could tell that there was a shift, a 180, and he was going down pretty quickly. So we decided in the beginning of July to go to the Gerson Institute. Originally, we wanted to just do it at home because it is very costly to travel there and go there and be there. You're there for 2 weeks, and it's just basically like a nutritional chemo, basically. But we decided to do it. Excuse me. And the week before he went, he actually got to go to the World's Disc Golf Tournament.
I remember Dad telling me about
Virginia,
that. Yeah,
and it was a big deal. Oh my gosh.
He was geeking on that, I guarantee you.
Dude, he was so.
So I've never got into the disc golf or just golf in general.
Worlds
anything with the
is
word
basically
golf.
like the Masters.
Yeah.
Okay, in regular ball golf, the World's Disc Golf Tournament is basically like the Masters.
What about this? The pro cornhole, like they've got
cornhole?
Yes, have you not seen that?
No.
Oh no, they got it was like on ESPN.
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it.
So I think they hosted it in Owensboro, like the World Nationals, whatever. Yeah, yes. I'm just
that makes sense because this
so
is
now
like cornhole USA.
It may even be an Olympic event. I don't know if it is or not. So cornhole, or not cornhole, but disc golf. I don't know if I just haven't.
Well.
I don't even know if I've played it, so I can't really comment on it. I know Dad loves it. Dad got into it. Kevin got Dad into it.
Disc golf, yeah, your daddy does like to play it. Disc golf came into Kevin's life through his brother Doug.
Okay, Dougie.
Yep, Dougie in Oklahoma. He's got Dougie's doubles down there. Dougie's doubles tournament. There's a plug for you, Dougie.
That's cool.
But he's a big deal.
What part of Oklahoma?
Mustang,
Oklahoma.
It's about
oh my goodness
25 minutes, 30 minutes out of Oklahoma
So the
City.
coolest thing, Mustang, Oklahoma, there's a fire department there, okay? When I was at the fire station, I wanted to do a big event for the elementary school. And Mustang, Oklahoma does this fire production for the kids. So I reached out to them.
Really?
And they sent me their everything. How cool is that? That's cool.
Mustang, Oklahoma is a cool place. Me and Kevin actually thought about moving Mustang.
Yeah.
When we first got married. Because
completely off subject.
Might as well. Cool. Mustang is kind of like, it's bigger than Princeton. It's like a Madisonville, basically. Like if in comparison to Marion. But the thing about it was, the people are just so nice there.
Yeah.
And
they say Madisonville's the friendliest place on earth. I think.
Really?
That's what their little sign is.
I mean, I like
you have to look it up. Yeah, it's not
I'm
bad.
a little triggered by their hospital because
I'm a little triggered by the lack of restaurants.
Well, yeah, I don't know, man. Have you been to that new Lucky buffet that they've got like stacked away in some hotel?
Yes,
dude.
We went. Me and Manny went. It's been several months ago, actually, last year.
It's so
it wasn't
good.
Bad. Yeah,
it's so good.
But
anyway,
all right. So
back little ADHD squirrel there. So yeah, Kevin, we start doing the treatments, whatever, starts kind of going downhill a little bit. He decides to go to the World's Disc Golf Tournament. I'll never forget. I went golfing with my friend Mallory one afternoon. Kevin was having a good day. And his friend Hoyt that I was talking about earlier, just going to watch walk Annie down the aisle. Hoyt and him went fishing at Wing Haven, and they played a few holes of disc golf and went and ate Mexican. So Kevin's all giddy, he's giddy. And he's like, all right, I'm going to ask you a question. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, Hoyt has offered to pay my way, flight and everything to Virginia to go to this disc golf tournament. And I've always wanted to go. Because, I mean, it's Worlds. It's all over the world every year. I don't even know when it'll be in the United States again.
Oh, cool.
So he's like, can I go? And I'm like, absolutely. Under one condition. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, Hoyt has got to look me straight in the face and swear that he's going to make you take your juicer.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And take care of yourself. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, we'll see how it is.
I bet he did do none of them.
Day 3, he calls me and he's like, you take such better care of me than I do.
Hoyt is not a good babysitter, Mama.
And I was mad. I was almost mad at Hoyt for like half a second until he came back in the house and I was like, come here, stupid. Because it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it. Kevin had the time of his life. It was, honest to goodness, one of the biggest things that he ever did in his life. And God worked that out. Yeah. You know what I mean? And Hoyt got to have
he looks so happy in them posts, too.
Oh, dude, those Facebook, pictures of him, he's just like, taking a selfie with him. And I mean, he had a blast. And he sent me a picture of his watch every day. He was walking like crazy steps. Like, it's insane. I mean, he was like late. It had already, we didn't know it, but it had already spread into his liver at that point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so he was just traveling the
Was
world,
living it
like
up,
whatever,
man.
So
Maxfield the
anyway,
machine.
he got Maxfield the machine.
Yeah.
That's right. And so the day that he got back from Virginia, he slept that evening, and we drove at 3 o'clock the next morning to Louisville to catch a plane to go to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix to San Diego. We stayed in a hotel in San Diego. They came and got us from Tijuana and took us to Gerson Institute. And we were supposed to be there 2 weeks, and we were there a week before we found out that it had spread into his liver. And they pretty much recommended that we come home. And
But that was it.
That was basically kind of where we were at. So once we got home, we didn't give up. Once we got home, we went and got a port placed because his veins were just, how that is. I mean, they were blown and tiny, and they rolled anyway before any of this happened. And so we got a port placed for that, for fluids, because he was just so dehydrated. And then about 3 weeks went by, in and out of consciousness, and I know people are thinking, why didn't he go to the oncologist? Why he didn't want to do chemo? He didn't want to do chemo, unless just absolutely necessary.
How did that make you feel? How did you feel? Like, I mean,
so up until and since you've asked me to do this podcast, I've been doing a lot of thinking back on stuff. I felt so helpless and hopeless at that point in the journey. And, I think that the misconception of our journey, everybody was constantly like, you're so upbeat, and how can you smile in the face of death? And but Kevin, he was so ready to meet God at any point in his life.
right.
My job as his wife was to support him. It wasn't about what I wanted.
So you pretty
know what
much,
I mean?
like, your selfishness, I guess.
Yeah.
Had been, you kind of put that back on the back burner, or did that creep in?
Yeah, I mean, it did. It got to the point where I was just pretty much crying out to God to fix it.
Yeah.
Fix this. And in reality, and in retrospect, I didn't need to be fixed. I just needed to be there for Kevin.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Just to support him and be what he needed.
That's tough.
Oh,
it's tough to admit
it's the hardest thing that I've ever done, and I hope that it's the hardest thing that I ever do. But I will say this, I'm proud. I'm proud of him first and foremost, because he's there wasn't a day, Rick, there wasn't a day that he woke up from the time before January hit that he did not have some ache or pain or ailment or discomfort of any kind. There was not one day, but he continued to press forward, and I'm proud of him for that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of myself that I was able, I got up every single morning and juiced until I couldn't juice, and that sounds silly, but man, I'm telling you, every day, I did everything that I possibly could to be there for him.
Right.
And I'm thankful for that, because he's worth it. And if he could come back today, I'd do it 1,000,000 times again, because he was worth it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he can't.
Yeah, I don't think
he's glad he wouldn't want to. And I say that because he wouldn't want to come back. But it was brutal. It was brutal, but he was worth it.
Yeah.
He was worth it.
So we go to the Gerson Center.
Yep, we
all
go to Gerson.
We do all that.
We're
we come
down
back
there
home
for a week, and he could not keep his pain under control. They couldn't keep his pain under control.
So when you're talking about pain, what kind of pain is he experiencing?
So his stomach, at this point in time, his pancreas, the tumor was growing to the point that it had started pressing so hard on that duodenum that and we actually got to see him. It was really cool down there. They're really, really phenomenal people at the Gerson Institute. They all speak their primary language is Spanish, but they speak English. But they are all these people who basically have come together to try and show people another way of combating cancer. But they're not against conventional medicine.
So let me ask you this.
And that's the misconception.
I'm a big conspiracy theorist. Like,
okay.
I love that kind of stuff, right?
I'm ready. I'm with you.
I believe in Bigfoot. Like,
My dad does too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm here
if he's not real, cool. If he is, that'd be freaking amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something to believe. It's something good to believe in. It's cool because I've never heard of Bigfoot like slaughtering people. He just likes to play hide and go seek.
He likes
right?
beef jerky.
So, conspiracy theories. Do you think they actually have a cure for any type of cancer, all cancers? And this is just a broad, just what do you think? Right off the top of your head.
Yes.
Because I think they do too. I think it's such a.
You know that fenbendazole we were talking about?
Yeah. It was smoking down some tumor.
I'm just telling you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's.
And that's not the cure.
Right.
But
It's
there are
something.
things, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, it's the craziest thing because, let's just say you get a cut on your finger and you've been putting Neosporin on it and it's not healing, and then you go to your granny's and she throws a little monkey's blood, iodine, or some kerosene on it, and a day later it's healed up. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm not telling people to go like drink kerosene or nothing.
No, and full disclosure, have an oncologist.
Right.
But have an oncologist who will allow you to do what you want to do
and you
within
guys,
reason.
Y'all dealt with a lot of different physicians and doctors.
Oh, dude, and that was a lot of our downfall too. I think.
And I think I've always thought if I was ever a physician or a doctor, I would want to have an open mind.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, and I'm not saying every one of them, because I know some really good physicians and doctors.
100%,
work with a lot of them. That's all about, okay, I'm tied to this hospital. I'm making this hospital money. It's all about this, and this. But if you can find those people, like my buddy Nick did with his dad, and that's open to saying, you know what, I can't give it to you, but if you can, try it. I mean, at this point,
100%.
Right? So at this point, has Kevin accepted the fact that, I mean, obviously you talked about it, that there's probably nothing going to work.
Yes. Kevin, right? Yeah. Yeah. However, and we had a discussion in the very beginning because a lot of it was right here. Mm-hmm. And when you said the word cancer earlier, it hit me. People get the word, they get the diagnosis cancer, and they automatically just think, well, this is it.
Yeah. This
is how I'm going out. And that's not true. But when you take it up here that it's true, and Kevin didn't do that. Him and I had a discussion in the very beginning, and I was like, I'm going to tell you something. When your body tells you no, this right here, you tell it that it's calling the shots. Yeah. And so we went to Gerson, and, Kevin, bless his heart, he was so tired. He was building up fluid. And like I was saying a while ago, they actually scanned to see where the tumor was pressing up against that duodenum, and the food was just slowly going through. And what ended up happening when we got home, when we got the port put in, he started retaining fluid in his feet after we got home from that. And I recognized the signs because I had been doing so much research. He was full in his stomach. He was full everywhere. His legs had started swelling, and I was like, okay, this is it. And so finally I had told him, do you want to go to the hospital? No. Do you want to go to the hospital? No. He didn't want to go, and I understand why, because it was brutal. We had been in hospitals, in and out of hospitals, and doctors, like I said, forever, and you just get to a point where you're like, dude, I want to die in peace, But he finally the one night in like 3 weeks that I left the house to go get a Walmart pickup, and he always did that to me, even before he was sick, he'd wait until I left the house to go do something. He'd be like, hey, I'm over in Princeton Walmart waiting on a Walmart pickup, and I get a call, and he's like, hey, babe, and I'm like, hey, are you okay? And he's like, I'm ready to go to the hospital, and I'm like, perfect.
Really?
You know what I mean?
Right.
I'd love to hear it. So anyway, he called Hoyt, and they head out to Madisonville. They ended up giving him a pain shot and sending him home, and the next day he's just literally dying. I mean, he's literally dying. And he was like, I can't do this. And I said, get your clothes on, go take you a bath, because it's going to be a week before you get another one. We're going to Evansville. And we went to Deaconess, and he was in the hospital for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks up there. And that's when, we discovered that it had completely shut off his stomach, and he was getting absolutely no nutrition. And so they sucked his stomach out, put in a G tube to be able to suck it out without having to do the NG tube, because he had so many of those tubes in his nose. He was so tired of that. And so we finally got the NG tube. They put a tube into his liver bile duct extraction tube. And so he had that, and he had the G tube and the peg to be able to feed and take out. But anyway, he was on TPN, which is IV nutrition. Right. He was on that for a while. And then finally, and I knew whenever we got put into Evansville, I mean, I was just like, hospice. And I'd said it a couple times. He was like, man, just shut up about that, because hospice, when people hear that, they think that's it. But that's not the truth. People live years on hospice. You know what I'm saying? It's end of life care, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die then.
Right.
In our case, obviously, it was a little bit different because he was already so close to the end. But we finally had one of the nurses come in, and her name was Ashley, and she was a saving grace for me. But she just came in and
Yeah, because up to this point, you're doing everything.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he
And Annie.
yeah,
on top of that.
100%. I mean, she had actually told one of them had actually told the girls on night shift that if they came in the room and Kevin was gone, not to hit the code button because I didn't deserve to be woke up like that because it was just me. I mean, it was just me and him. At this point, we had been in the hospital so much, and people were just like, and not that they didn't care, but we had done this so much, and you know how it gets once you're in the hospital so much. I mean, people stop, the shock factor wears off.
Right.
And everybody's already like, well, he's dying, he's going to die. So, but I was just there. I was there, and he was sleeping so much, and all I had to do was think.
Yeah.
And oh my Lord, so I made friends with the nurses and they would take me to their potlucks, while Kevin was sleeping. I'd be like, give him another shot of that pain med so I can go eat something because I can't sit here and watch
go
this.
eat some of that green bean
You know what
casserole.
I'm saying? And Kevin be like, what'd you eat? And I'm like, nothing. I ain't, because he was starving, literally, and so anyway, but one of the doctors finally came in. It was a random weekend doctor, and he was like, listen, you need to go home. And Kevin was like, I just want to know. He had actually started some radiation treatments because they're weird about giving radiation treatments to pancreatic patients because it's so intertwined in there with your intestines and stuff, and it shoots your intestines, and it's awful. But we had them, they said that they would do it in a special case to hopefully get that tumor to kind of reside back so that he could eat. But it just got to the point where he was so weak that, he wanted to finish him out, man. That was his goal.
Yeah.
Radiation was his last hurrah. If I can get this, I just want to finish this out. But the weekend came and he wasn't getting radiation on the weekend because it was the weekend. And the doctor came in and was like, look, dude, you need to go home. You need to go home and you need to enjoy the time you got left. And so that's when we told the doctor we had a 5-year-old daughter. And I've never seen a physician squall their guts out. But he was like, I had no idea. And we were like, yeah, man. I mean, why do you think that we're doing this? It's not, it's for us. But Kevin, and I'll never forget this, man. We were in Mexico. He was telling me, if I don't make it through this, I want Hoyt to walk Annie down the aisle. And I was like, okay, because I, in the beginning, I was all, no, we're not talking like that. We're not saying that. But as time went on, it was, he has stuff he has to say, and Kayla, stop being selfish and let him say it.
Right.
And so he said he wanted Annie to walk down the aisle. Well, then whenever we got to Evansville and he had the tube placed to be able to drain his stomach instead of through his nose, he was waking up from the surgery. And there was this little nurse in there, this guy named Noah. He was 26, a year younger than me. And you could tell that he went to the gym. You could tell that he was like, I'm not going to say roids or anything. He went on steroids, but he was like doing the most, And Kevin wakes up and he's, mouthing that he loves me. They let me go back in the room with him. And I know now in hindsight it's because in case that he died. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Literally.
Yeah.
But, I went back in the room with him while he was waking up and he was mouthing that he loved me and stuff. And he's sitting there telling this guy, he's like, you ever read David Goggins? And this guy's like, I've heard of him. And he's like, listen, you need to read his book, Can't Touch Me. And he's witnessing to this guy, and he literally says, he's like, I'm sitting here on my deathbed. And he's like, if there's anything that you ever hear from any of your patients, do it now. Don't wait. If you want to take care of yourself, you do it now. Because I don't regret anything in life I haven't done. I only regret the things, or I don't regret anything in life that I have done. I only regret the things that I didn't do. And so anyway, but he wakes up and he looks at me and he told me, he said, I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to miss out on Annie's life. And he said, "You're going to be fine." And I said, "Kevin," he said, "No, you're going to be fine because you know what genuine love feels like now." Because that was the thing. Kevin and I, we got married in a fever like the Johnny and June deal. I
Yeah.
mean, we literally did. We got married so quick and had a baby so quick, and we had all this stuff just happening back to back to back. And then our life just kind of got stopped. And up until that point, we didn't, I mean, we loved one another. It wasn't that we didn't love each other, but we didn't have that intimate talking type of love. It was just, work, church, kids, work. You know what I mean? Like it was
Right,
just this
right.
consistent line of got to do this, got to rob Peter to pay Paul, and whatever. But this gave us the opportunity to see life for what it was, and it was beautiful. I mean, he got diagnosed with a terminal cancer with the chance of living at 3%. And it was the most beautiful journey that I could have ever imagined, to get to love someone so deeply and be there for someone so wonderful. And Kevin, like I told you, growing up, his biological mother left him and his brothers, or his brother and his sister,
Right.
whenever he was young. And his dad and his stepmom raised him. And Kevin, he just had a really tough way to go growing up. But he never, and he'd probably be mortified if he even knew that I said any of that
He
out
probably
loud.
would.
But it's the truth, in his heart, he had the biggest heart the size of Texas. But as far as for his own self receiving love, Kevin did not do that well.
Yeah.
But when he got sick, and the outpouring from the community, and the outpouring from his friends, and the outpouring from his family, and just all of the people that came out of the woodworks to show him.
He made such a silent impact.
Dude.
And what I mean by that is, like, the things he was doing and the things he did, I don't think you realize.
He didn't, and that's what he said, man. That outpouring of love was such a big deal to him. The night his birthday was 2 days before he passed.
Yeah.
His 46th birthday. And we had the parade. I called the mayor and I said, because I asked Kevin, I said, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" "Well, no, you were there.
Yeah.
It was us. We were there."
Yeah.
And you said, "What are you going to do for your birthday?" And he said, "Well, I don't know, but whatever it is, I hope I don't have to talk very much."
Yeah.
And at that point, I messaged the mayor, Deanna Browning. Her mama, Anna Easley, lives across the street from me. Annie calls her Anner, Miss Anner. But anyway, I messaged Deanna and I said, "What can we do that is quick, fast, and in a hurry, but will make him feel as loved as he really is?" And she says, "I'm on it." And so she sets up the birthday parade. And man, there was over 60 vehicles that came through in front of our house with cards and gift cards and balloons. And it was just the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen in my entire life, because he was so loved. I mean, Bobby West pulls up and salutes him, And Kevin, that night, he told me, he said, "Can you believe it?" He actually had to go to the bathroom. And I walked in there with him because I followed him around like a lost puppy. But he called me in there and he said, "Can you believe that?" And I said, "That's crazy, isn't it?" And he said, "All those people came for us." And he had no idea. He said, "I had no idea that people loved me like this." And so, Kevin didn't get healed from a physical standpoint, and he passed 2 days later, and it was the most beautiful thing. And that sounds crazy, but it was absolutely beautiful, because the night of his birthday, we went to bed, and the next day woke up, and a lot of the time people right before they're getting ready to pass away, they'll have what they call terminal restlessness, and he was just up and out and up and out. And my Aunt Lisa, she was a hospice nurse for 6 years. She was a big, huge help for me at the house with him. And so we kind of just had to get him calmed down. We had to get him calmed down. And the man was on enough medication to tranquilize a horse, and he was still just up like, trying to fix his wheelchair and stuff. But the day that he passed away, he was the night before he passed away, Kevin and I were able to have a conversation, and his family had come in and he had said goodbye to them and everything. And then he called me in there, and he said, "You're going to be all right." I crawled up in his lap And as I did so many times before he got sick, I just crawled up in his lap and I sat on his chest, and he said, "You're going to be all right." And I said, "I know. You're going to be all right too." And he said, "I know." And I said, "I'm not going to let anything happen to you. God's here with us." And you could feel God's presence in the room. I mean, it was just like a tangible spirit of God just there with us. And I said, "I'm going to take care of Annie. Don't you worry. And you're going to be all right. And I'm going to see you again. I'm going to see you again." And so we just sat there and we held each other, and, you know, we went through that whole thing, but that was just our way. I thanked him. I thanked him for being such a wonderful husband, and I thanked him for choosing me when he didn't have to, because I
Right.
chased him down, you know, and I just said, "Thank you. Thank you for showing me what it's like to love somebody unconditionally." And he said, "I thank you for showing me what it's like to be unconditionally loved." And that's where we ended it. You know, he was there the next day, but he was in and out of consciousness, and he actually
Right.
got to talk to his mom, his birth
Oh, good.
mom. And you know, because he was holding on for something. And that was the craziest thing about it. And you'll hear about it all the time. People that are passing away,
Just
even,
for that
they're holding
one
on to
something.
something. And my Aunt Lisa's like, "Kayla Ann, I have never in my life, he should not be here right now. This man is holding on for something." And so I'm like, well, it's got to be his mama, you know, because he hadn't talked to his biological mother. I've never met her. Annie's never met her. But he hadn't talked to her in like 10 years, you know,
Right.
and it wasn't like he wasn't mad at her or anything. They
No,
just
right.
didn't talk. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? He loved his mom, and so do we. But I'm like, it's got to be his mom. And so my Aunt Lisa, you know, she calls on behalf of hospice, and, you know, she's like, you know, "I'm here with Kevin, and we think that he's holding on for something." And so she talked to him. Well, hour goes by, and we're like, "Dude, what is going
What are you
on?" You know?
doing?
And Aunt Lisa's like, "It's Annie. It's Annie," you know. And so I called my mom, and Annie was there, and she was kind of aware. Annie was aware at this point. She was scared, you know, and,
Yeah.
and she had been there for the birthday celebration, but we had
Yes.
been very, very
Vague.
vague with her, you know, about things, because it was Daddy, and Kevin did not want her to remember him that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so anyway, I called Mom and I said, "Listen, it's getting close, and we think it's Annie." And so I said, "Annie, you want to talk to Daddy?" She said, "No, I'm okay." And I was like,
I'm
"Okay,
good."
great," you know. And so I start scaling through videos. Aunt Lisa's like, "Just get a video," you know, because he was out of it. I mean, he was pretty out of
Right.
it at this point. And so I got a video, and it was from Annie whenever she was at her recital. And I sent it to Kevin and said, "Hi, Daddy, I love you, and I'll see you soon." And so I went over there beside him, and I put it by his ear and played it. And he sat straight up, and he said, "I love you, baby. I'll see you soon." Isn't that crazy? And he just laid right back,
And that was it.
and he went to heaven.
Well, that's some beautiful bullshit. uh,
Isn't it though?
yeah, you know,
But
it's
you know what, Rick? I prayed. You know, my prayer the whole time was for Kevin to live, obviously, from a
Right.
selfish standpoint. But I prayed, "God, please don't let him suffer."
Yeah.
And, you know, up until Virginia, up until we went to Gerson, up until, you know, the end stage, Kevin had a great quality of life for a
Yeah.
pancreatic patient. I mean, he really did.
Yeah, I mean, just being in the medical field and seeing patients like that.
Yeah. He did
It
not,
was
had you not
crazy.
known
Yeah.
for a lot of the time, the jaundice was there in the very beginning, but once he started eating right, it went away for a while. I mean,
Yeah.
he did not look sick for about 2 months in that time period. You know, he looked great. I mean, Kevin was like, "Man, I wish I've been trying to lose this much weight forever."
Right,
You know,
yeah.
he'd tell people, "I've got the greatest diet plan, but you probably don't want it." You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. You don't
And
want this one.
but he had a great quality of life. But above all of that, Kevin's heart was healed, and it was something that I prayed for the whole time we were married, just for Kevin to be able, for his heart to be healed. And it was. God gave us that, man.
So-
and that trumps, you know, you asked me a while ago if there's, you know, a reason for everything. I don't know why it had to happen to us, but I do know why it happened to us. Kevin deserved every single thing that the community did for him.
Yeah.
He deserved every bit of it, man. There were people, like I said, coming out of the woodworks, and this is a good time too, because I've said thank you a lot to a lot of people, but thank you if you had anything to do with us or our family or whatever, whether it was money or gifts or food or prayers. Prayers the biggest. Thank you, because I wouldn't have made it without God, and then we wouldn't have made it without the support of our community and people from all over, Rick. I mean, it was just, people were so gracious. You showed my husband love that he had never experienced, and I can never repay that back. I can never repay that back.
You know, you can have some of the worst things happen, and it's always like our communities. You know, even, you know, I'm from Crittenden, and that's always going to be my hometown, but I've been over here for 20 plus years, you know, for a long time. And it's the same as both. Like, something happens and people step up.
Oh.
And it's so crazy. And it's sad that it has to be something like that,
Yep.
you know? Because when there's not something like that, and I've even thought before, man, I wish something would happen so people would come together, you know, and not meaning anything bad to somebody.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because it's so nice. And it's like, why can't people be like that all the time? There's no sense in it.
Well, and I think one of the big things for Kevin, the reason why it was such an outpouring, and Kevin didn't realize it, but Kevin was like that all the time. You know what I mean?
Oh, Maxfield was it,
and that's why I told him, you know, that night that we were after his birthday, I said, baby, you have no idea the amount of people.
I don't think he ever had an idea of the. I'm speaking from me, the amount of influence he had on people, right? Yeah, we grew up, we didn't spend as much time together after everybody starts their own lives or whatever. And my fault, his fault, whose ever fault, we didn't reach out to each other. But it was always, I would think about him and I'd be like, what's up, dude? You know, and he would, hey, buddy. And, you know, that's how it was.
I think about you coming to our house that day. You know, I had never met you, didn't know you from Adam. But the seconds you had messaged me, and that was after he was he wasn't able to get on his phone at that point.
A lot of it was because I knew, you know, Dad would keep me informed.
Yeah.
And I knew that, you know, there was people constantly in and out. And I see this because of my profession.
Yes.
I know how that impacts, and I know how that is for people. So I was like, I know, like, I love Kevin with everything, but I knew that I didn't want to be an intrusion. I didn't want to be that other person.
Well, I'll tell you this. The second that I said, Rick White's messaged me, and he said, you tell Ricky to get over here. And
Ricky.
and he was just like, you tell him, come on. And the second you walked in that house, it was like you had, I'd known you forever, and y'all just picked up right where you left off, man.
Yeah, he was.
It was one of the most beautiful things. I loved getting to see Kevin be Kevin, because, you know, working in detention, working in corrections, the detention center, you know, during that time period of our marriage, he was constantly, you know, he was talking to convicted felons. He was talking to murderers. He was talking to, you know, crazy stuff in our mind's eye on a day-to-day basis, hearing things. When he came home, he didn't want to talk. And he was like that for years. And then, you know, obviously he came out of his shell once he was able to step away from that. But when he got sick, I was able, man, I heard stories. I found out things about him that I was like, it's a good thing you didn't talk before we got married, you know, because, but truly, like, he was able to talk, man.
Yeah.
And even to this day, I get people that come up off the street, you're Maxfield's wife. Dude, he used to put a smashed Pepsi can on the top, you know, and I'm like, what? Yeah. But he was hilarious.
Oh, he was so much fun.
And I'm so grateful that he was mine, and that I have Annie, and that there are people out there that can continue to help me carry on his legacy in her life, and for the future generations.
You know, Maxfield left an accidental legacy. You know,
which is obviously and honestly like perfect for him, because that's how he would want it.
You know, I heard someone that has somewhat in a position of leadership was like, I don't care about that. I want to leave a legacy, and you know, live your legacy. And that's what Maxfield did, and
Yeah.
that legacy will be there. And that's why I called it an
100%.
accidental legacy, because
Yeah.
I don't think Maxfield or the people who strive for these kind of things realize that that's what they're doing, is by living their legacy, they're leaving a legacy.
He was such a humble man.
Yeah, he was a good dude.
He was
man.
one of the most humble people, if not the most humble person. And I'm not saying that just because he's my
No, he
husband.
was.
I'm saying that because
Well,
I
there's
saw him
people
live
that can
his life,
vouch
how
that,
he lived his
that
life.
can prove that. And he was honestly probably one of my truest friends. Like, it was,
Yeah.
And as we grew up, like I said, and I can't, and I hate it, but I can't deal with, because I guess I'm around it all the time, and it's been really worse the last 10 years or so, that when somebody is going through what Kevin's going through, I don't want to see, like, I don't want to, I see that stuff every day, and I like I'm not a funeral kind of guy, like, and I was, every now and then I'm like, crap, I should have just sucked it up and went to his funeral, but I know, he was like, dude, don't.
No, he told you that day. He said, I don't want you to don't come to the cemetery. Remember him telling you that? Don't come to the cemetery. I want you here right now.
Yeah, and
that's a big thing I want to really hone in on too for people that are watching. It was hard. It's hard for you. It was hard for a lot of people to see Kevin in that state.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I can say is just don't feel guilty about it, because it's understandable, and we understand. Kevin, though, he did not want to be treated as his illness.
Yeah.
And it was the first experience. This is the first experience that I've ever had of someone, not that I wanted to be away from it, but I couldn't get away from it.
Yeah.
It was my life. And so the more that I was there, I never saw him as sick with cancer. He was just Kevin, and we were dealing with cancer. You know what I'm saying? And so I encourage people, to push that to the side and just go.
Yeah.
And just love them where they're at. Yeah. And that goes for anything in life, man. Just love people where they're at. Because if you don't, what are you going to miss out on?
Yeah.
What are they going to miss out on by not having that conversation or having that, connection? Because that's what life is about, man, is just about making connections with people you love, you care about, making connections with people you can make a difference in their life. And that's Kevin's legacy, is just making those connections with people who might not get that because of what they've done or what they haven't done, or
he always went above and beyond.
Yeah.
And that's I know that's kind of the focus of this episode of the podcast, which is going to be a two-parter if you've made it this far. But it's people like him, and you being a big part of that. It's not a one-part story, like, just the things that you keep doing in your videos. Like, I finally found you on TikTok a while back, and I was like, oh, this all right, cool. And I like those random, it's like, 'cause I'm just crazy like that too.
Yeah.
That randomness, like the your radio playing at the post office today. That's hilarious. Been there, done that with a lot worse
dude,
stuff.
I know.
But and that's the thing. Just and people often wonder. I wonder a lot, like, how Annie's doing, and I see the videos, and that's why I like to see those videos. And
Annie's doing well.
Yeah.
Annie has her moments, she's something that we've dealt with, and I'm in therapy. I was in therapy prior to all this because Kevin and I had a miscarriage, and I left the church that we were in, and it was just really, really tough. So I started going to therapy prior to Kevin even getting sick, and it actually ended up being a godsend because my therapist and me are like this.
Tight. Yeah.
She's a godsend. But I was very concerned because Annie was, she didn't want me to be away from her. And like at all. And, at first, and you would think it would be common sense, but she was afraid that if I left, I wasn't going to come back.
Yeah.
And, there were times where she would say things, like, if you die, I'll just be here, but I'll be okay because God's in my heart, right?
Yeah,
and I'm
right.
like, Annie, honey,
Yeah.
You're never going to be alone no matter what,
Yeah,
you
no.
know? And so, like, conversations with 5-year-olds that you don't typically have with 5-year-olds, that's something that's really hard. Aspects such as, being alone. It's hard, you know what I mean? But I'm so thankful for a support system. I have found... I thought while Kevin was sick, I had discovered who was truly there and who wasn't. But it's actually turned out that after Kevin's passing, I'm starting to figure out who actually cares and who doesn't care. Because moving forward without Kevin is something that's painful.
Yeah.
And it's something that, not a whole lot of people really understand.
Well, something you never planned for,
No.
right?
No, you don't plan on this. This is not, and there's no script on how to grieve. There's no script on how to cope. It's just doing what, number one, what's honorable by God to do, but number two, what makes you feel okay.
Yeah, and it's not, you'll get a lot of these people to be like, oh my God, she's doing. They don't know.
No, they have no idea what I'm going through. Nobody understands what anyone is going through unless you've walked in their shoes.
Exactly.
And that's something, it's one of those things everybody says now, and you're like, well, honest to goodness.
It's truth. Like, I could not. Like,
I'm just telling you, I'm proud of myself. And it's not necessarily even a prideful thing. I'm proud of myself. Kevin was proud of me. Our big thing.
Dude, Maxfield would be so pissed if you would just sit and just, woe is me. That's not.
He told me.
I
He
guarantee
said,
you did.
He said, you have my permission to grieve, but don't you dare wallow in it.
Yeah.
And he said, don't you dare stay alone.
Yeah.
You move forward with your life. You do what's right by you and what's right by Annie. But don't you ever think for 1 second that anything that you do is going to do anything.
Do you see little signs of him?
Oh, yeah.
When you're doing stuff?
Oh, yeah. I hear him all the time.
I know, like, people may not believe that, but I can.
I hear him all the time. And I think that it's him, like actually him?
Right,
no, but I do, all the time I'll hear him say, like, the Lord of mercy. I hear that all the time, and I'm like, Kevin, but the thing about it is Kevin taught me how to love myself.
Yeah.
He saw something in me that I have never accepted to be true. And like I was saying, our big thing was to tell each other, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. He didn't get that, and I did, so that was a big thing.
What sticks with me, there's two big events during school that sticks with me. I found a pair of these Reebok pumps in the locker room, and I was playing basketball. We were in like 7th or 8th grade. And I was a bench warmer. Like,
Same.
I
should have been.
I wanted to play because it was cool,
time.
right? I wanted to play because it was cool.
Yeah.
But then some of the people had kind of, I guess, I don't know. I'm not gonna lay blame on people.
Yeah, whatever.
But I remember I found these pair of Reebok pumps, and they'd been in there for a long time. Like, I just kept eyeballing them, and I'm like, I know it's not right to take them, whatever. And I put them on, and they're like 2 sizes too big. And Maxfield sees me doing it, and I was like, these aren't mine, but I'm going to wear them for practice. Or it may have been before a game. I think it may have been practice. He's like, well, even though they're not yours, I don't think they would care that you borrowed them, but you may want to pump them up as high as they go because they're pretty big on you, Ricky. And that's the thing. Like, people that, like, I went to school with and my friends, it's Ricky. Now Rick is my grown-up name, and Richard's going to be my old man name.
That's
what I
right.
mean? So it's
That's
Ricky,
right.
Rick, and Richard. But anyway.
Perfect.
And then the second time was we were practicing in the cafeteria side and not in the big gym. And I had a baggy shirt on because I don't even know if I, forgot to bring my clothes or what it was. And I had it tucked in. No, I didn't have it tucked in. And it was, down here. And some of the other guys were kind of making fun of me or whatever. And Maxfield's like, just tuck it in the front and just don't worry about it. Just be cool about it, So I'm tucking it in the front, and he's like, and also, Ricky, lean forward when you shoot your free throws. I'm tired of seeing you airball them. So, but it's just those two little, and they're not even anything, but those are two events that stood out most. And of course, our skunk incident in the deer stand, and just, and I can always remember, no matter what, he was always he would always show up when nobody else would. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, yeah, I know we've talked a while, and I'm probably going to turn this into a 2-part episode because it's worth it. Kevin was worth it.
Yeah,
you guys are worth it. Annie's worth it. So,
I appreciate you doing this, Rick.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming to do it because it's not even about this episode. It's about for you. This is always going to be out there. Once I put it out into everybody knows, you put it on the web, it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
You're always going to have that. I'll even save it to a jump drive so that way you can put it up. And I think Annie would be proud, to have something to look back on and just kind of hear that story. I know he was proud of her. Like you could just tell.
Annie
like,
was the love of
and
his
I always
life.
knew.
Yeah.
I always knew that
He was the
when
best dad.
Maxfield had a kid, it was going to be over with.
Well,
Like,
and that's something else, and I want to finish it out really with saying this. You know, Kevin had cancer, but cancer didn't have Kevin.
oh yeah, that's good.
And Kevin was so much more.
Yeah.
Kevin was so much more than just that diagnosis. He was a wonderful husband. He was a wonderful daddy.
Yeah.
Friend, son-in-law, my parents, man. When I got him, they were just like, where did you find
Right.
this angel? Like, how did you manage to find this precious man? And Kevin was a good friend to all.
Yeah.
There was no person that Kevin did not love or care about.
Absolutely.
Even enemies, what you would think would be enemies,
Right.
he still loved and cared
Yeah.
for them too. And I know where he is.
Yeah.
I know
He's
where
loving
he
it.
is.
He's where he wanted to be.
He's
anyway.
playing disc golf in heaven right
You
now,
guarantee
man.
he is.
And he's there with our baby Addie, and he's living it up.
Yeah.
So my job is just to keep pressing forward down here, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it in his honor.
And don't let nobody like make you think different. You know, the choices you make moving forward are the choices that you deem right. It's nobody else's business what you do or how you do it. And yeah, Maxfield, he's a one of a kind, and I'm honored to have this as a tribute to him. That's the biggest thing. And I couldn't imagine going through what you guys went through, especially at your age. You know, being 27 now, I think, aren't
28.
you? 28.
I was 27.
You just turned 28.
Yeah, 27 when it all happened. But, you know, that was one thing about it, you know, going through the motions of having to, you know, especially hospice. The hospice week or 5 days, I mean, that was the brutal side of it because he came home to die.
Right.
And I knew he was going to die, but I didn't know when he was going to die. And, you know, he's fighting. In his mind, he's fighting, and he was fighting it, you know, but going through all the drains, and you're familiar with it in your line of work, you know, all the drains and draining and constantly pushing fluids and pushing meds and, you know, ultimately knowing that the time clock is running out.
Yeah.
That was just so brutal. So I'm just so grateful, man, that we were able to have that conversation the night before that he passed away, that I was able to thank him and just promise him to take care of our little girl and to take care of myself.
A lot of people don't get that closure.
I didn't know.
You know what?
No, and I got it.
You're lucky.
I got it. I'm so fortunate and so blessed to have had that, man.
I got so tickled when I was sitting there and he was trying to explain his bag to him. I was like, dude, trust me.
I do this all day, bud.
Dude, I've had it up to my elbows. You know, it's no big deal. But he was like, I needed to know. And then he was like, oh yeah, that's right. Never mind.
You're a paramedic.
But yeah, I'm very thankful and glad and blessed to have him in my life. And I was glad that I sucked it up and came and seen him.
I'm so thankful you got to talk to him. I'm thankful that I got to meet you, man. None of this would be happening.
Yeah. So, like I said, this is a Maxfield tribute for sure. But like, you're welcome back anytime if you got some more stories. And which I know you do.
Plenty.
I know you do.
I got plenty.
So
the content begins.
Yeah, we can.
But this is the most important.
I seen where somebody said you ought to start your own podcast.
I know.
You ought to start your own podcast.
Thinking about it.
You ought to do it.
Thinking about it. We'll see how this one. Thank you. We'll see how this one goes over.
I think it'll go well.
Cool.
We're definitely, like I said, we're definitely have to do a 2-parter because I think that would help break it up. I can't wait to get it edited. I'm probably gonna start working on it as soon as you leave because I want to get it out because it's good.
Yeah.
It's good, and you have to definitely post some more videos singing Annie, letting Annie sing whatever. You don't even have to post them; you just send them to me or whatever.
All right.
So yeah, they're so cute. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for being good to Kevin.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big deal. So, as my buddy Frenchie always says, y'all be good to each other.